What is up, everybody? I'm Brandon and you are back in the Gilstrap garage. Today we've got a 99 Softail Evo motor that we're missing the belt on. It got cut, it broke. I don't know exactly what the story is, but bottom line, it's here to get the belt replaced. So I'm gonna tear down the primary right now. We're gonna go through everything that you need to know to replace the belt on your Harley Davidson. Step one for getting this belt ready to change out is we're going to drain the oil from the primary. This particular model, on the earlier models, there's a drain plug that'll sit flush. Be careful when you check that, because a lot of the times it's not an Allen wrench, it is a star. In this particular case, it's a T40. Just be real careful, double check, make sure it's not a Torx head, or make sure it is a Torx head, not an Allen head, before you strip that thing out of there. So we're gonna drain this out right now. I'm gonna pop the derby cover off as well to get oil draining quick. It's cold, it's probably gonna take a while, but that's what we're doing first. It's a Torx, not an Allen. Now that I've got oil draining, I'm gonna move over to the clutch side of things, and I'm gonna loosen up the clutch cable while this strip's dry, because we're gonna have to take out the clutch basket assembly. You're just gonna run your cable all the way in. While we're on the topic of the clutch, I'm gonna undo this nut here and just back this assembly all the way out. It's gonna have to come loose anyway. That's oddly tight. That's all it needs, just backed off. We can take that whole assembly, we can take that whole piece out easily with a pair of snap ring pliers and pull it out. I prefer to do it that way. I guess if you wanted to, if you were careful putting it back together, you could leave it in. I'm not even gonna explain that. That's backed off. After I get the whole cover off, I'll take that internal piece out with a pair of snap ring pliers and set it off to the side. Up next, we're gonna be taking off, or getting our floorboard and our shifter assembly out of the way. I'm not gonna take the floorboards all the way off. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna loosen the bolts in the front and take the bolts in the rear all the way out and kind of just let this hang down here. And then I gotta take off at least the rear shifter. No, actually both will have to come off because I got a decorative piece that's in the way here, so I'm just gonna pull that apart completely and kind of push that off over to the side. You know what, to get the inner primary out of the way, I'm gonna have to take off this whole assembly, which will require the floorboards coming all the way off. Okay. There's the floorboard assembly. I gotta take off 2 more bolts to get the rest of that bracket off and have it out of the way. That's all out of the way. The oil's done dripping. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put the drain plug back in it with some new oil resistant Teflon so that I don't forget about it later, because so many times I've gone to fill up the primary and not have the drain plug back in it and lost some of my oil. So I'm gonna do that right now. Next, if I remember correctly, these inspection cover bolts do hold on. I think 2 of them hold on the outer primary cover. So I'm gonna pull those out. I'm gonna pull those completely off, and I'm gonna take all the bolts out for the primary. I'm gonna show you a little trick that I use if sometimes they're different lengths and the project's gonna take a little longer. I'm not really gonna need it, but I'm gonna show you what I do in case it's a project that you gotta come back to. First, I'm gonna pull out these 4 inspection cover bolts. See, one of them's longer than the other. I believe 2 of them are long and 2 of them are short. The longer ones hold the cover into place. Here's a little trick I use. I've got a piece of cardboard here that may not look like much on camera right now, but these are a rough pattern of the primary bolts. I'm gonna start by sticking those center ones that I just pulled out. I know which ones are my top, my bottom, my left and right, and I'm gonna pull out the other ones one by one and put them in their holes, and then that way I won't have any of them in the wrong spot. I won't be trying to figure out what goes where. It's not that hard to do if you get them mixed up, but this just keeps it real simple, real quick. I normally have a pattern that I pull these out in and lay them on the bench a certain way too, so I don't lose track, but sometimes when you go to tear these things apart, you end up jumping on another project or go to another part of the bike and stuff gets jumbled around. And simple as that. Now I won't get any of them mixed up. Dripping a little bit of oil. Put a rag down there. I'm gonna loosen up. Oh, that's pretty loose. I'm gonna loosen up the tension on my primary chain right now. On this style tensioner, this older style, it's got 2 locking tabs that hold on these 2 bottom bolts. A screwdriver and a soft hammer is all it takes. All right, now I'm going to undo the jack shaft. Well, I'm gonna undo the starter. Starting on this side, on this jack shaft, there's a small bolt with a similar style locking tab that holds this in place. Just bend that backwards. An impact makes that a lot easier to do because it won't just spin around on you. I'm gonna wait to pull out that whole assembly until, yeah, I'm jumping too far ahead. I'm gonna pull out my clutch assembly and my compensator first before I pull that starter all the way out. So now we gotta go back to what I was talking about earlier and take out this adjustment right here, this adjuster piece for the clutch. Oh, careful with those snap rings. Now we're gonna have a large nut inside there and another one here. And I do have the locking tool for this compensator. Sometimes you can get them off without putting that tool in there. You can just use your impact and run these out of there. If you don't have that impact, you need a big old pry bar. Or not pry bar, breaker bar. Okay, so this one here is 1.5 inches. I believe the other one is 1 1/8 inches. Nope. 1.25 inches. Oh, 1 3/16. Or 30 millimeter. And if I'm not mistaken, on this 5 speeds, this is reverse thread. Yep, righty-loosey on that one. I'm gonna call the customer and recommend that we replace his tensioner. It's getting worn in there pretty good. Another thing that you want to do is when you're taking your chain off, if the assembly is coming all the way apart, you want to mark either what I'm going to use a paint marker, use a grease pencil, use something to indicate what the outside of your chain was. So when you put it back together, it's running in the same direction that it was before. I mark 2, sometimes 3 links just in case something gets rubbed off. I'm not going to be guessing. Simple as that. All right, now I'm going to jump over to the other side of the bike and go back to taking apart the starter. If I'm not mistaken again, it's going to be a 1/4 inch Allen. You're going to need a long one, especially on these soft tails, to get in there. The oil tank makes it really hard to pull these starters apart, but it's possible. So I've got an extension with me. I've got my long rounded Allen, make it a little easier to get in there from some different angles. Just going to take those 2 bolts all the way out, and then we're going to try to push the starter assembly out of the inner primary. If I had to say, that's probably the hardest part about doing this job, especially if you're doing it on a soft tail, is getting those 2 starter bolts out. Once you have an idea of how to do it, it goes pretty easy, but trying to figure out how to get in there and get those 2 bolts out of there at that angle, it's not fun. I think the first time I did one, it took like, I don't want to say hours, but it might have been hours to try to figure out how we were getting in there and getting those out. Before I push on that too hard, I'm going to try to wiggle it out, pulling out the primary. I'm going to try to walk it off of there. And again, all these inner primary bolts have those same kind of locking tabs, so I'm going to get, probably instead of beating on the back end of my screwdriver, I'm going to get a small chisel or something like that and just pry all these little tabs back over. And on the older bikes, talking about soft tails, baggers, Dynas, there are 2 bolts on the front side of this primary assembly. On the outside, they gotta be taken apart along with all the bolts on the inside. And I'm gonna try to walk this off of this starter assembly. And bam, just like that. I may not have even had to take all that out of there, but good thing we're doing this job. It looks like that seal may have been leaking a little bit back there. Hopefully it's not the main seal on the transmission. Hopefully it's this one, but I'll check it out, see what's going on. Make sure it's all good to go. We've got a new seal for that anyway in our kit. I'll probably zap this thing through the parts washer, clean it up real good. And yeah, I'm gonna keep plugging away. The next step that we need to do, I need to move my stand back and get that front wheel off of the stand here so I can pull the front wheel off. All right, I can confidently say that it was the inner primary seal that's leaking, because as I pulled this off and started looking at it, I found that. And if you don't know what that is, that's the spring that holds the lip of your oil seal in place. I've got the back secured. The rear wheel spins freely. I'll be able to pull that out. How am I doing on time? Got the axle out. I always like to put my spacers on in the order that they came out, even though they really only go on one way. Just, I don't know, like the cardboard trick, an easier way for me to do it. My least favorite part about these Softails is getting these wheels out with these nice long sweeping fenders. I'm gonna lift the bike up as high as I'm comfortable doing in the back and probably take this plate out from the stand. This is easier to do if you're on one of like those scissor jacks that I have that Sportster on back there. I mean, look at all that room you can get out from underneath that thing. But yeah, it's a challenge. There it is, filthy. I went from not that dirty to real dirty real quick. Now the last part that we got to take out before we can put the new belt in is the centerpiece on the swing arm right here. The center part of the mount. And I'm hoping that I don't have to take the exhaust off to do it. I think I can get the nut off on this side. I just got to swing this clamp for this part around. I got to loosen it and spin it, and I hope I can get it out of there. That decorative cap that was missing the set screw, so it was loose. The other side's already gone. I'd imagine that fell off. I thought this side was a nut, but it's a bolt, so depending on how much room I have loosening that, I might have to undo this exhaust, which I don't want to do. The less stuff I have to do, the better. Yeah, that's all I needed right there, was that piece out of the way. You can hold that centerpiece kind of from an angle with the 7/8 wrench. I'm gonna clean the threads on all the bolts, of course. I'm gonna put some Loctite on everything and get everything back together, ready to go. Get this tire back on. I like working alone, but sometimes an extra set of hands would be nice. I just put a light coat of anti-seize on my axle. All right guys, I got the wheel back on. The belt's not tight. The brakes are on. That's about all I can get done today. I gotta get off to work. I will be back on this first thing in the morning, and I'm gonna get it buttoned up, and hopefully I can track down that chain tensioner and get this bike out of here back to its owner. Welcome back guys. It is the next day. Not that you missed out on anything. It's been a bit of a crazy morning, but I did get the inside of this primary cleaned up. I got my new seals pressed in already. So I changed the starter shaft seal here and the main shaft seal here. I have the Jim's tool to press in that main shaft seal. I just found a socket that fit right on the lip of the starter seal. Press that right in, we won't have any issues. I ran to Harley this morning and I got a new primary chain tensioner, and this bike is gonna go back together right now. I got all my grimy little fingerprints cleaned up off of the wheel and everything from yesterday. The belt is still loose. Honestly, I'll probably adjust that before I build the primary back up. That's what I'm gonna do right now. And then the primary will go together and this bike will be ready to go home. All right, the belt is adjusted. The back axle is all torqued down. I have the belt ran a little bit on the tighter side because I anticipate this brand new belt stretching a little bit. Start putting the inner primary together and start building that up on all the way out. And it's gonna start going quick and smooth from here on out. We are almost done. I think the hard part's over. I think I'm gonna set this part up in time lapse. There's not really anything special going back together that you need to know that's different from taking it apart. And I want to listen to some music. I'm not going to use any of that time lapse. It's basically me standing there scratching my head and taking this inner primary off and on about 400 times, making phone calls, trying to see why this thing wouldn't line up. I was starting to think that the primary was warped, and then I pulled it back off, not wanting to assume that anything needed to be replaced. And I found 2 of the mounting bolts on the transmission loose, so it had caused it to shift. I had like, I don't know, a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch difference for the front bolts on this primary. It's driving me crazy, but I got it all bolted up right now. I'm gonna torque it down. I'm gonna recheck all the torque on all the engine and transmission mounting positions, and then I can stab in these few pieces and get it built up, and I'll be done with it. All right, I finally finished this thing. Got it all buttoned up. Unfortunately, I had to take the inner primary back out to put that piece of that jack shaft on the starter side. Not a big deal, got it done. I'm about to get it all wiped down and ready to go home. I just finished, let's see here. I just finished adjusting the clutch. I'll get that cable tied up a little bit better than it is and get it off of the lift and take it out for a little ride. The end of my videos is always real weak, especially when I run into so many little problems that just never end. But I just test rode that bike. Everything's all good to go. Everything's feeling good. We'll keep an eye on the adjustment. I'll tell the customer come back if he feels like it's getting loose or anything. But we fixed this problem. So if you guys enjoyed that video, drop a thumbs up. It's appreciated. Comment if you got any questions. And if you're not subscribed already, please consider doing so.